Greetings and salutations, friends, and welcome back to some more Horus Heresy lore breakdown. We are still on book number 7, Legion, and we just had a little scene with John Grammaticus talking to a creepy Eldar, telling him about how they've tried talking with all of the other legions, and they've expended hundreds of agents, which makes me wonder, why haven't any of the other legions realized this yet? Were all of those agents just really, really good? To the point of none of the Astartes legions ever suspected that anybody might be influencing them? I mean, the Cabal are very good at what they do, but damn, they must have been doing this for absolute ages, and nobody noticed, apparently. Huh. That's downright impressive, actually. Anyways, the clue is that the Alpha Legion is their one single sole remaining chance, because they figure they're new enough to be susceptible to some convincing. They can perhaps be steered towards the correct path. They are free of corruption or any other influences. Oh boy. The Cabal are very, very wrong. The thing is, the Alpha Legion is kind of what they're looking for, and kind of the exact opposite of what they are looking for. The Cabal are looking for somebody willing to take orders, essentially. Somebody that they can simply just tell what to do and not think too much about it. And as we heard in the previous video, the Alpha Legion are the precise opposite of that. They are fiercely independent, to the point where they even question their own imperial mandate. And that's from the Emperor. I imagine they're gonna have a very hard time accepting marching orders from a bunch of shadowy aliens that don't really want to tell them what exactly is expected of them. It always baffles me how the Eldar seem to think that, oh, no, silly moonkegs. We can just tell them what to do, they're not going to be suspicious of us, and they're definitely not going to be hostile, or in any way combat our influence. No, it'll be fine. We are so very, very smart after all. And speaking of the Eldar and the Cabal being ever so very, very smart, turns out that their little demonstration for the Alpha Legion, the Nerthine, and their wind magic was actually a really, really bad idea. It was far too effective of a demonstration, because apparently the Nerthine possess a Deus Ex Machina, also referred to as a black box. Basically, they can make the entire planet go poof, which is a problem if all of the Alpha Legionnaires the Cabal wish to turn to their cause is currently on the fucking planet. So now they are on a bit of a time limit, in fact, literally hours. John Grammaticus has to throw subterfuge to the wind, and eventually decides to simply wander up to a couple of Alpha Legion agents and say, hello, my name is John Grammaticus, I am an alien agent, and I would like to speak to your lord and master. And that works. I mean, the Alpha Legion wants to get a hold of him too, and while they wouldn't mind putting a bolt round in his head, they are rather curious why he would pick now, of all occasions, to simply just wander out of the nowhere and go, hey, can I see your boss, please? Though, mind you, this sudden change in tactic was not at all unwarranted. The Black Cube is apparently a very nasty piece of weapon. Presumably, according to John Grammaticus in his contact within the Cabal, it was a weapon of the ancient war between the Old Ones and the Necrons, or one of their sub-races, potentially, one of the slave races, or the ones created by the Old Ones. Precisely which one, well, we don't know, but we do know it is more than capable of wiping out an entire world, which makes it pretty goddamn dangerous. John Grammaticus was finally led to Alpharius and Omegon, and he almost guessed the truth, or at the very least he suspected it, but he didn't quite make the leap of logic that they were twins just yet. However, he did manage to convince both of them that it was time to fuck the hell off, although the Primarchs were rather hesitant to trust the word of, well, this random Cabal agent, and, well, he was asking them to literally abandon a battlefield, something that no Legionis Astartes take particularly lightly. But clearly he had seen something in John Grammaticus that told him that he probably wasn't bullshitting. The Primarch also managed to convince the local Imperial Army commander that it was also perhaps best if he'd get his men out of Dodge as well. It was at this point rather late, however, because whilst an Astartes legion is capable of extraditing itself from a planet very, very quickly because they are extraordinarily mobile, and because there's, relatively speaking, fairly few of them without that much in the way of heavy material, the Imperial Army, on the other hand, well, that is an entirely different matter, particularly as they were also busy fighting the Nerthine. Oh yes, there's that as well. You see, the Black Cube requires a certain trigger. That trigger is blood. Oceans of it. And so the Nerthine, in one last desperate act of, well, pure vengeance, basically, simply threw themselves at the Imperial lines, spending their lives in the hundreds of thousands, and claiming a few thousand Imperial Army lives as well, as they employed a bit of sorcery, summoning a few demons and such other nasty creatures to ride upon. They also hid their movements in the middle of a massive sandstorm, giving them the element of surprise. Now, obviously, them, with their low technology, could never ever hope to fight the Imperial Army in a pitched battle, which was what they had just engaged them in. The element of surprise carried them a decent distance, but at the end of the day, they were still facing down the Imperial Army. Heavy tanks, artillery, titans, heavy bolters, etc. They were doomed, and in any reasonable scenario, the Imperial Army would suffer a few thousand casualties, and the Nerthine would be wiped off the map. But seeing as dying was their actual objective, well, yeah, that presented a bit of a problem. And seeing as the Imperial Army also didn't know that killing them was a bad thing, they quite naturally set about the task of murdering them with the greatest amount of intensity. Oh yay. Anyways, most of the Imperial Army, kind of-ish, managed to withdraw, but they had to leave behind pretty much all of their heavy weaponry, including pretty much the entirety of the Titan Legion. Oh, the Admechs were not happy about that. Oh, not happy at all. In fact, they made a vow to never again assist the Lord Commander in any further military endeavor, which is basically a death sentence for his military career. But hey, at least it wasn't a literal death sentence for him and his military command, so, you know, relatively speaking, it could have gone worse. Not much worse, mind you, but it could have gone worse. Anyways, once they're finally off the planet, John Grammaticus is of course sequestered all by his lonesome, with only one of the Geno Hets being allowed to, well, kind of try to make him trust him really, and make him, well, fuck up, basically, but hey, we'll get to that in a moment. There are some interesting little tidbits of information before that, however. One is that, apparently, the Alpha Legion train alongside their operatives. They will be a legionnaire instructing their operatives in combat and subterfuge and infiltration tactics. That is rather interesting. Most Astartes legions maintain a fair bit of distance between themselves and their various forms of servants and other personnel aboard their ships. It's almost as if the Alpha Legion has taken these people, well, into their legion, which makes sense because, well, they themselves have said that when you are an Alpha Legion operative, you are one of them. You are Alpha Legion, even if you are not actually a legionnaire. But it still is rather interesting, since it shows a lack of pretense, I suppose, which is, again, rather unique within the Legiones Astartes. Another rather strange thing is that apparently there's very little, if any at all, camaraderie between the various operatives, the human operatives that is, which is somewhat odd. You would think that being surrounded by Astartes, complete not non-humans, the humans would, you know, bond together in a fashion and try and, well, socialize with one another. Seems like a fairly normal human thing to do, but apparently there's virtually none of that within the Alpha Legion. Wonder why? That is really, really strange, again, considering that they don't have much in the way of camaraderie, if any, since most of these will have been taken from their original units. They should be feeling very, very isolated, a situation in which they should be seeking out, well, pretty much any form of companionship they could get their hands on, and yet, nope, not at all. There's no suggestion that the Alpha Legion is encouraging this, or doing anything to them either, so it's a bit odd. Strangeness aside, however, let's move forward. So, John Grammaticus has now taken the Alpha Legion and what remained of the Imperial army that had to flee North to a planet called Hydra. A rather obvious little nod there, but, well, the Cabal figured the Alpha Legion might find it funny. They didn't. The Cabal is bad at understanding Space Marines. They have terraformed a small area of this extremely hostile planet to be vaguely supportive of human life, enough to the point where they're not going to die immediately. They have terraformed an area of some 300 kilometers, and they have done so in 5 years. That is quick. 5 years to terraform an area 300 kilometers. Now, that might not sound like much, and it isn't much, technically speaking, compared to, the entire planet, but in just 5 years, that is technology far beyond what the Imperium possesses. Not to mention the sheer amount of energy required to terraform a hostile climate, and all of that purely to give them a place to meet the Alpha Legion. That is a display of technological prowess and power that the Alpha Legion undoubtedly would find very, very, very suspicious. Again, the Cabal just doesn't understand humans or the Legiones Astartes in the slightest. They do this and think, oh, hey, this'll be a nice welcome mat. It'll make them feel relaxed. Abso-fucking-lutely not. Exact opposite, actually. And of course, it doesn't stop there. We immediately get yet another example of how bad the Cabal is at its goddamn job. For an organization that's been around for something like 90,000 plus years, they sure are terrible at this. It's kind of confusing how they can be so good at some things and so horrible at others. They don't even know that Horus has already been made War Master. Considering that this happened at the Triumph of Ulanor, one of the biggest goddamn events in the entire Imperium, mind you, that brought tons of legions and several Primarchs, not to mention, the fact that they leveled an entire continent to create the stage. A stage occupied by heaven only knows how many hundreds of Imperial Army regiments, the Astartes forces, the Mechanicus forces, all of the ships in orbit, etc. I mean, this thing was sent across the quote-unquote news of the Imperium in every which direction. They heard about this on Terra, and not a single Cabal agent got wind of this? That is impressive. Anyways, impressive as that might be, this is not a good thing for John Grammaticus. He thought that they had upwards of 2 years to prepare the Alpha Legion and properly train them, vet them, inform them, etc. Test that they might not go off the deep end, so and so on. Instead, they are 4 months behind schedule. Oh, well then. Understandably, this threw John Grammaticus into a bit of a problematic situation. Clearly, the Alpha Legion were not about to trust the Cabal, unfucking surprisingly, and yet he had just learned that he had run out of time, and he really needed the Alpha Legion to simply get down onto the planet right now and initiate the conversation, something they were utterly and completely unwilling to do. As such, John Grammaticus decided to go for a somewhat more extreme option. He utilized one of the old agents from the Alpha Legion recruited on Earth, one of their newer ones, and a several series of psychological suggestions he had essentially programmed into his head to make him help him escape the Alpha Legion's battle barge. On the way, they also picked up a Roxanne, the Uxo that John Grammaticus' magical Winky had so bedazzled back on Earth. And John Grammaticus as well had developed quite a fair bit of feelings for the female, something the Alpha Legion was more than aware of course. It stands testament to just how panicked and how urgently John Grammaticus was acting right now that he didn't think about this. Okay, so I was pretty sure my mental suggestion to this operative wasn't actually working, and yet it is. I've also been looking for Roxanne and being really worried about her, and there she is. Convenient. Oh, and by the way, the operative can also get me off the ship, undetected, quote-unquote, and down to the very place I need to be, where I can get into secret contact with my Cabal masters. How convenient. But again, since John Grammaticus was rather flustered at the time, we can excuse him for not spotting the massive pink Alpha Legion elephant in the room. An elephant that revealed itself rather suddenly once John Grammaticus had gotten to his Cabal masters and had them reveal themselves. Suddenly, it turned out that the Alpha Legion had been tracking Roxanne and their operative, and they popped into the Cabal chamber with Boltus trained. The Cabal, obviously, were very annoyed by this, finding it very unreasonable that they should be the ones to have guns pointed at them. Granted, they'd kinda planned to do that to the Alpha Legion the whole way along, but minor bloody details. By the way, we should probably discuss the Cabal real quick. So, I keep referring to them as Eldar because their diplomatic traits are very, very Eldar. In other words, completely and utterly fucking worthless. But they're not only made up of Eldar, they're clearly one of the more respected and ancient races to make up their Cabal, but there are also several other Xeno species, some of which the Imperium recognizes and knows of, and others which, apparently, they don't. Either because there's so goddamn few of them that it's not widely held knowledge within the Imperium, or it might be that they've somehow managed to hide themselves all the way up until this point, which, well, the galaxy isn't entirely conquered just yet, so it's not impossible, although it would certainly be quite the feat of hide-and-go-seek. Then again, considering the ship they bring down to the planet immediately afterwards, they might be very, very good at hide-and-go-seek. So, the planet is a halting site where they like to put down their massive-ass ships. They bring down one of these ships because that is the only place they can share with the Alpha Legion the acuity, their vision of the future. Their ship is interesting, so apparently, it is capable of cloaking itself from an entire Imperial battle fleet, plus the Astartes vessels, with very little in the way of problems. Additionally, it moves so fast that the Imperium really doesn't know what's happening, and it's managed to pass by the entire fleet and land on the planet in the space of literal goddamn minutes, which is holy fucking shit. I mean, we could go into the logic of this and just how far that is, and just how ridiculous a distance, all of the problems with, battering a spaceship into an atmosphere, essentially, no matter how thin, that quickly, blah blah blah, but let's just leave it at this. It is pretty goddamn impressive. It is also extraordinarily unnerving, which is a bit of a problem, because the Lord Commander, sitting in orbit after his rather disastrous failure at Nerth, is not particularly happy about the fact that Alfarius clearly isn't telling him everything, and considering the fact that the Alpha Legion have kinda been dicking them over lately, not telling them what they need to know and basically lying straight to their faces for a while, the Lord Commander's getting really, really annoyed with the Alpha Legion, and he's starting to figure, maybe, just maybe, if the Alpha Legion isn't watching out for the best interests of my backside, perhaps I shouldn't be looking out for the best interest of their backsides. And that is precisely what this delicate and fragile diplomatic conversation requires. A third party that doesn't really know what's going on, but is in command of an Imperial battle fleet. What could possibly go wrong? And to make things even worse, Lord Commander Namadjira has also gotten his hand on one of the Alpha Legion's operatives, thanks to his Lucifer Blacks. They pop down to the planet where the Genochilids are deployed, they locate and then take the Hetman away from his troops, bring him back into orbit, and start interrogating him. They already kind of have everything they need, they've got plenty of evidence, plus they now have a Geno 5-2 Chiliad Hetman with a Hydra branded onto his hip. I knew that was going to bite them in the ass at one point. And the Lucifer Blacks are very good at what they do, and interrogating people in an enhanced manner is definitely one of the things they do. Now, the Hetman, having been trained by the Alpha Legion, is doing the best he can to hold out under their gentle, tender administrations, but probably is just a question of time, and this is a big issue. The Astartes legions, of course, have a fair bit of freedom in how to operate, but infiltrating allied Imperial regiments and doing random nonsense with them, that might be pushing it rather badly. Indeed, the Lord Commander is thinking maybe, just maybe, he can have sanctions thrown at them. He's even dreaming that maybe, just maybe, he can have the entire Alpha Legion censored and perhaps even disbanded. It is even hinted at that perhaps another legion has overstepped the line previously, and this is being spoken in regards to the disbandment order. It might have happened. There are some hints in later books as well that suggest that maybe one of the two missing legions were disbanded relatively peacefully, so there certainly would be precedence. Oh, and by the way, whilst it might seem like the Lord Commander is being a bit of a douchebag here, I can totally understand why he's behaving like this. I mean, you don't get to the posting of Lord Commander of the Imperial Army without having a fair bit of skill, understanding, knowledge, and, perhaps most importantly of all, a fair bit of an ego. And Alpharius has been doing nothing but ruffling said ego since he showed up. He has been pissing in the Lord Commander's cornflakes non-goddamn stop for 5+ months now. If anything, I'm surprised it took the Lord Commander this long to start considering backstabbing Alpharius. And speaking of Alpharius, so this is where we get our little revelation, and it was a pretty goddamn cool one to begin with. There'd been some hints, certainly, but it was a really nice one when I read the book for the first time. The Primarch of the Alpha Legion is not one person, it is two. Alpharius and Omegon, and the Cabal have somehow managed to figure this out. They didn't bother telling John Grammaticus, which, to be honest, would have been really fucking useful information for Grammaticus to know about, but hey, again, details. It was a really cool plot twist, though. The whole thing that the Alpha Legion's Primarchs were twins, that's really cool. Another thing that's just more unique, because again, the Alpha Legion is an incredibly unique legion, so it kind of stands to reason that some of that unique nature might come from the duplicity and the, indeed, duality of their Primarchs. Anywho, this is where the real test begins. The Alpha Legion Primarchs are going to be shown the acuity, the look into the future to try and convince them that Horus is going to be a very bad boy, because up until this point, they've basically been rejecting the entire idea that the Imperium could ever be thrown into a civil war out of hand as just purely ridiculous, which isn't too strange, because that is basically everybody's understanding at this point in time. Nobody can, right now, imagine that this could ever take place. It is literally an impossibility. I've gone over this before, but just to continuously emphasize this, because it really is, in these people's minds, an absolute certainty. The idea that the Imperium and the Emperor's favoured sons could possibly betray him would be like suggesting to them that rain could somehow fall upwards. It just literally is impossible. So the Cabal is going to have to put on one fuck of a song and dance to convince them otherwise. Being a skeptical Primarch, of course, Alpharius and Omegon decide that they're going to try and do their damnedest to figure out if this acuity can be relied upon. As such, both Alpharius and Omegon is going to receive it, but just in case it's something unique with their biology or point of view, they will also bring in Sheer, an Alpha Legion Psyker, human Psyker, non-Astartes, and one of the unaugmented humans, Peto, one of their new converts from the Geno 5-2 Chiliads. Alpharius is probably hoping that if they've got several different biological types, basically, they might be able to unveil any trickery that the Cabal might be trying to pull on them. And that, of course, leads us to the Acuity itself. Now, where to begin? Well, let's start with the information it gives to the Alpha Legion Primarchs and their new little friends, or friend. Shea the Psyker dies immediately because, well, considering the future he was shown and the fact that he was a Psyker, yeah, I would pretty much expect him to fall over dead pretty much immediately. As for the futures, they are shown two. One in which Horus wins. In this future, the Emperor is killed, which again confuses me with the whole the Emperor shan't die thing, but I guess they mean that he shouldn't die as in undying? You know, like on the Golden Throne, I assume. I'm a bit confused. Or maybe the Emperor escapes? I don't know. They don't really go into enough detail for me to get that. It's almost to the point that I think that maybe it was a slight writing mistake, the previous one. Anyways, in this future, Horus wins, but he starts to hate himself for what he has done, which, I gotta admit, confuses me a bit, because the way they say it is, it sounds as if Horus starts hating himself for the things he had to do to win his victory. Now, Horus is going to be doing some pretty horrifying shit in the later books, because Horus is of the opinion that the only just war is a swift war. And the only swift war is a brutal, merciless, and horrifying war, to the point where the victor no longer wishes to wage any such war ever again, and the defeated would never even contemplate continuing said war. And yet, apparently, he's going to end up hating himself for this. I don't know. That doesn't sound like Horus. Bearing in mind, Horus has done some pretty horrifying shit up until this point as well, but he has been able to justify it as for the greater good, for the Imperium, for his father's plans. And you could certainly argue that perhaps he was able to justify this because he was able to put the burden over onto his father. Basically, he was thinking, okay, my father's basically a god, he's infallible, therefore anything he orders me to do is by definition just. But on the other hand, if he himself is the one that is pulling the trigger without any higher power to kind of shift the blame over onto, perhaps he would find the burden hard to bear. Potentially, but again, considering the chaos corruption that's going to be sneaking over Horus, I gotta admit, I find that a bit difficult to swallow. If anything, I would think it'd be more likely that he would see the corruption within his new Imperium, because this new Horus will, throughout the books, as far as I've read too, always distrust, mislike, and to some extent hate chaos. He will deal with it, he will use it, but he will always mistrust it and mislike it. After winning his war, if he then came to discover that, oh hey, most of my brothers have actually converted to chaos, and look at the horrible fucking shit that is still taking place within my Imperium, and at this point it is not in the name of winning a war, now it is purely in the name of these demonic entities, yeah, I could definitely see him rising up in arms against that, and that could definitely lead to a second civil war. So, I suspect maybe the Cabal have gotten their facts a little bit backwards, but I can definitely see the final outcome being something like that, where Horus basically starts another civil war, or his brothers start another one against him. Because you gotta remember, whilst his brothers have sworn allegiance, quote-unquote, to him, most of them are doing it for their own reasons, rather than any real belief in Horus's new Imperium. The Cabal also estimate that this is going to take a couple hundred years or so, and at the end of it, apparently, with the basic extermination of the human race, it will somehow take the Chaos Gods with it, which I'm not really figuring out how that would happen. Okay, so one of the primary forces behind the Chaos Gods were not humanity. It was the Eldar. Now, the Eldar are also kind of dying, so maybe the Eldar is reckoning that, okay, you know, we're basically going to off ourselves as well, and with the death of the Eldar and the human race, maybe that would be enough to kind of starve out the Chaos Gods, but I feel like that is anthropomorphizing the gods of chaos far too much. I can't really imagine how they would ever die, seeing as they are fed off, well, people's most base emotions that pretty much anything have. That is why they are the 4 primary chaos gods: anger, change, disease, lust. These are things that pretty much any sentient and living creature has, so again, I'm struggling to figure out how this would function. Perhaps they are thinking that if a massive display of emotion, like what Birth Slaanesh can create a Chaos God, perhaps they are thinking that a sudden cataclysm followed by a very, very rapid and drastic drop-off in these energies might have the reverse effect? Granted, it is, at the end of the day, chaos, so it's difficult to really tell for sure, but I'm not entirely convinced about the logic of this plan. And I suspect neither are the Cabal, because the Cabal have these 2 futures, and they consider these 2 futures to be gospel. They don't seem to question how or why these things would come to pass. They simply accept them. And that might indeed be one of the reasons why they didn't bother checking in on whether or not Horus had become War Master, because they'd seen the future. What need would they have of basic intelligence, you know? If they already know what's going to happen, and they're so sure about it, why would they bother making extra sure, if you catch my drift? It certainly would be something I could see the Eldar doing. Anyways, then there's the second future. In this future, the Emperor dies to kill Horus, and then gets put on the Golden Throne. Okay, that sounds a lot like 40k. However, that is the 40k we know. In other words, that is the 40k in which the Alpha Legion betrays the Emperor. And the Cabal never tells the Alpha Legion that. Hell, they might not even know. The question then is, are they hiding that fact from the Alpha Legion, or do they simply not understand? Perhaps there is a third future, one that they have simply just discarded as impractical or unlikely, in which the Alpha Legion does not betray the Emperor, and instead use their powers of subterfuge and manipulation to prevent Horus's betrayal, or at the very least, fuck with it mightily. For example, can you imagine what would happen at Istvan 5 if the Alpha Legion, coasting quietly behind the other traitor legions coming to reinforce the loyalists, suddenly send out a loud and clear message to the loyalist fleets, warning, you are betrayed, and then, from the midst of the heretical fleet, open fire upon said heretic fleets? I don't know. That might be just enough to throw Horus's plans seriously out of fucking whack. And honestly, that is one of the reasons why I think that the Alpha Legion are still loyalists in modern 40k. I suspect they realize this very thing, and they have now started working against chaos, because they were told that the future was set in stone, and clearly it wasn't. And so now, in modern 40k, they are doing anything they can to weaken Chaos while still remaining on their good side, to remain as an infiltration force. The Siege of Rax is a perfect example of this, but that's my next big lore series, so I wouldn't want to tip you off too much on the events of that wonderful little battle. Anyways, those are the 2 futures. Honestly, I think both of them are really bloody dodgy, and I suspect that the Cabal are not telling the Alpha Legion a lot of things in this case, but eventually Alpharius and Omegon decide that since they know that the Emperor's greatest goal is the annihilation of chaos, they really only have one choice if they are to remain loyal to the Emperor's greatest goal, and that is, ironically enough, to betray him. It is a pretty goddamn cool storyline, I have to admit. And if this is handled with care in future books, which to some extent it is, and maybe even in modern 40k, oh, it could be a truly epic goddamn storyline. But, well, we've seen what Black Library has done to epic storylines in the past. They're a fucking craft. Anyways, let's try and wrap it up. So, the Lord Commander in Orbit has gotten really, really sick of the Alpha Legion's nonsense. And so they are sending Alfarius warnings, telling him that they're going to bombard the landing site if they don't get messages back immediately. Alfarius, realizing that he needs to get rid of some loose ends, orders the battle barge Beta to begin attacking the Imperial fleet, which at this point is completely unaware of the fact that they're about to be betrayed, and not really a match for Nastati's battle barge in their midst, with weapons trained and shields raised. And to make matters considerably worse, in true Alpha Legion fashion, they've hidden a dagger along with the sword. The second Alpha Legion battle barge, the Alpha, has been hiding behind the planet all along. The fact that the Lord Commander didn't bother sending out scouting crafts to make sure nothing was hiding from him is, well, if anything, testament to how frustrated and useless he'd become after the defeat at Nurth, so, in all due likelihood, not too much of a loss. The two battle barges begin cutting through the Imperial flotilla, and they get utterly raped. There's really not much they could do against the two Astartes battle barges, especially as they're also getting boarded by God only knows how many Alpha Legion at the exact same time. It is a complete and utter one-sided slaughter. In the midst of it, the Alpha Legion also rescues their operative that had been taken captured by the Lucifer Blacks. Oh, by the way, just as an example of how good the Lucifer Blacks are, whilst trying to protect his Lord Commander, the chief of the Lucifer Blacks actually manages to wound Alfarius in a sword fight. Granted, the wound basically amounts to little less than a scratch, but the simple fact that he managed to land a hit on Alfarius and even draw goddamn blood, that is seriously fucking well done. Granted, Alfarius and Omegon aren't quite as potent as a full Primarch, but that really doesn't take anything away from this one Lucifer Black's achievement. The Lord Commander, well, he meets his end swiftly after his loyal Lucifer Black. And in the midst of all of this misery and death and mayhem and traitorous nonsense and all of that, John Grammaticus decides to pop himself out of the nearest airlock. Which, considering he basically just signed the death sentence as far as he's concerned of the entire human race, yeah, I can see why that might weigh upon his mind a little bit. Of course, we know that John Grammaticus isn't actually dead, which means that either he chickened out, or, far more likely, the Cabal was like, well, he's spinning rather prettily through space with ice crystals forming from his buttocks, but I kind of feel like fucking with him a little bit more. Let's drag him back out of the void and dump his happy little ass down on a planet about to get invaded by word bearers. That'll teach the bitch a lesson. And that just about rounds it up for Legion. All in all, pretty good book. It manages to stay on the correct side of ridiculous for the Alpha Legion. It doesn't pop too far over the line, although the whole Cabal thing is, well, it's basically a cartoon version of what one might think a shadowy conspiracy might look like. They think they're really, really smart. Turns out they're not actually all that smart after all, and they're going to fuck everything up. And I gotta say, the whole Alpha Legion buying this shit hook, line, and sinker this quickly kind of annoys me. I mean, they didn't even stop to ask themselves, okay, so, right, fine, we're gonna buy the fact that Horus is going to betray us. Couldn't we at least discuss the idea that maybe we could fuck over Horus before turning traitor? Just, no. Apparently they immediately go with the, okay, well, then we're just gonna have to kill the Emperor part of the plan. It seems like a plot line that could really have benefited from some actual build-up instead of, I think literally the entire acuity and stuff is like the last 20 or 30 pages of the book, when it feels like that alone should probably have been 100-odd pages, but, well, constraints on book sizes and all of that. And to be fair, as we will see in the later books, the Alpha Legion are far from entirely convinced that the Cabal are on the right side of history, shall we say. Still, really good book, and the whole Omegon and Alfarius thing, really good twist. I enjoyed that quite a lot. So, until next time, I have been Arch. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you all again soon. Have a good day.